Good evening, everybody. Tonight's class is dedicated Lezecher Nishmas Imi Moirasi Rivka Bas Harab Reb Shloimeh. May her neshama have an aliyah. We're continuing with chapter 2 of tractate Shekalim. Mitzarfim Shekalim l'darkenes mipnei masi aderech. We can exchange and transfer Shekalim, machzas shekel coins that were collected from a community into darkonos, which are gold coins, so that it would lighten the burden for the messenger who is carrying them. This is a higher revenue of coin. It's a higher level of coin. Machzas shekel is silver, and these are gold. So there's going to be many fewer than the silver coins. Coins are heavy. Now this is telling us two things. Number one, that we're allowed to exchange it altogether. And two, we can exchange it to something other than silver. One might have thought that you cannot do that. And the reason one might have thought you cannot do that is because silver and gold fluctuate, the value fluctuates at a different rate. And so therefore, it's a possibility that the treasury, the temple treasury, will come to a loss. If we transfer silver into gold and then gold goes down and silver goes up, who lost money in this exchange? Hegdish. And generally speaking, Hegdish is always up on top. We ensure that Hegdish always gains out of a situation. So this is a novel concept that you can exchange the silver for gold. Okay. Just like there were shofar-shaped treasure chests, collection chests, pushkas in the Beis HaMikdash, so too there were in the provinces. And this is again teaching us two things. Number one, it was shaped like a shofar so that it would be difficult to steal because you drop it in the narrow end,
receptacle, and then you can't get into it.
It's more difficult to get into it. And furthermore, there were two of them. One was for shekels that you are giving for this year. If a person had not given in the previous year, those shekels cannot go into the regular collection, but it would have to go in a separate collection, which was this second shofar. And they had this going around even in the provinces so that you can pay back from previous years. But again, it could not go into the actual same chest.
If you have to pay from the previous year, it's also with a 25%.
No, that's nothing to do with that. Masha avru avru, but you should pay it back because you owe the money. But it does not go into the same collection.
So you don't get punished for not giving.
I didn't say that. I said you have to. You don't get an extra fee for not giving. Yeah. That's what I mean. Okay, good. You have townspeople who appoint a messenger and they send all of their shekels with him, and he's voluntarily taking those shekels up to Yerushalayim, to the Beis HaMikdash, and they get lost or stolen. Now, being that he's a shemer chinam, he's an unpaid watchman, so he's not liable for things that are stolen or that are lost. So now, im nisrama hatruma, if the collection in the Beis HaMikdash, 3 times a year, they would take out collections from the collections. And what did they do with those monies? They would take those monies and buy offerings for the public. And in this way, everyone had a stock in the public offerings. So if before these funds were stolen or lost in the temple, they had already lifted out monies, which also included representation for monies that were collected by agents and that were on the way. So then the people who have given their shekels have fulfilled their obligation. They have discharged their obligation, and they no longer need to give another half shekel. And so now the person who is the messenger from whom the funds were lost or stolen, he has to now swear as any shomer chinam has to do. So the Mishnah tells us nishboim lagizbarim, he has to now take an oath to the temple treasury because they're the ones that are going to suffer the loss. He has to swear that the monies were actually lost or stolen. He has to swear that he was not negligent, and he has to swear that he didn't misappropriate the funds earlier on, in which case he would be liable in all cases, even in cases of theft or loss. the imlav. But if the treasury did not take out funds from the treasure chest, and so these people have not yet been fully represented with their funds, meaning to say they have not yet purchased stock in the communal offerings. So now they have not purchased communal offerings. So now the person the messenger who the monies were lost or stolen from, he has to take an oath to whom? To the people from the city, because they're the ones who suffer the loss. And now the people from the city have to give a second half shekel.
Now, the only thing that confuses me is that they made a gzera, that when they gave the money to the guy and he's walking now to there, and they already took the money out, now if he loses the money, he's covered.
Correct. It's, again, using an example of stocks. The stock order was already made. They own the stock already. And so therefore...
But the money never made it to the stock.
It doesn't matter. But he's an agent of the temple. So it's in his hand.
So then why don't we use the same gzera before they took?
Because he's not an agent of the temple yet. Because the monies are not. He's not the monies. He's an agent until they take out money from the temple in the Beis Hamikdash in the treasure chamber. He's working for the Bnei Ha'ir. He's working for the townspeople. Once they accept the money, now he's working for them.
I see what you're saying. Okay.
Of course, voluntarily. Now, what happens if what happens if the monies that were lost, and now the people from the town had already given a second half shekel in their place? So now, what happens with these monies that are now found or that were returned by the thieves? So both the monies that were collected beforehand and the second set that was collected to replace the first ones are both considered shkalim. And the townspeople do not get credit for the following year.
Now, does this go also to the second show for the one of the previous year?
That's a good question. I don't know the answer, but I would have to look that up.
Yeah.
The question is, I would say not. I would say not, because previous years it's already done. Here, there's still going to be another collection later on, and there's just extra funds in there. So I would say not, but again, I don't. That's not my definitive answer. I would need to look that up. Beis. A person who gives somebody else a half shekel to contribute his half shekel for him. So he's now his agent. And then he forgets and he uses those funds to discharge his own half shekel requirement. So in Nisrama Truma, if at the Beis Hamikdash they had taken out funds from the treasure chest, Mo'al, this is considered a bona fide case of Me'ilah, where he misappropriated consecrated funds, and he will be liable for an Asham Me'ilah, and he will also have to give the Chomesh penalty, which is 25% penalty, and this is a law of the Torah, because he used holy and sanctified funds to discharge his own fulfillment, his own requirement. If a person used Hegdish money, consecrated money that was dedicated to the Beis Hamikdash, but not yet brought to the Beis Hamikdash, and he uses those monies inadvertently to discharge his half shekel requirement. Once again, im nisra matruma v'karva behema mo'al. If they took out funds, if at the treasury they took out funds, which means now taking out funds represents the idea of finalizing the stock that was purchased by everybody in.
Once they take out that money,
that stock in communal offerings is purchased, and so once a behema is now brought, which is brought every morning, every afternoon, he is now in violation of the Me'ilah prohibition, and he again would have to bring a carbon and be subject to the Chomesh penalty.
No, a second question: the money that's used to buy the animals. Wouldn't they buy the animals from the Beis Hamikdash themselves? Like
there were farmers and livestock sellers who would sell things to the Beis Hamikdash. They had to buy it from somewhere. Now, what happens if a person accidentally used money from Meiser Sheni or Meiser Sheni or Shvius funds? Meiser Sheni are funds that are generally taken to Yerushalayim and used to purchase food and eaten there. The Shvius, small amounts of Shvius monies, are also need to be used for food. So now if you use those inadvertently to discharge his machzas shekel requirement, so in such a case, it's not a me'ilah, he just yechal kenegdan, he just has to replace those funds and eat appropriately with the appropriate rules for the amount of the half shekel. Gimel, hamachanes mois, a person who gathers funds, va'amar, and he says, harei elu l'shikli, these funds are going to be used for my half shekel requirement. Beishamei Emrim, Beishamei says, Meisara Nadava. If it turns out that he took the money that he gathered together is more than a half shekel worth, the extra goes as a donation to the Beis Hamikdash. Beis Hillel Emrim, but Beis Hillel says, Meisara Chulin. The extra funds belong to himself and they are not consecrated. What happens if he doesn't say, these will be for my shekel, but if he says, Sha'avi mehen l'shikli, I will bring from them for my shekel requirement. Shavin shemeisar and chulam, both Beis Shammai and Beis Hillel agree that they will be non-consecrated funds, and he can keep them for himself.
So he gets to keep the surplus.
What happens if we're not talking about shekel, half shekel requirements? What if we're talking about Elul Chatas, a person who says these funds will be used for my Chatas offering, for my sin offering? Shavin Shameisar and Nadava both agree that the leftovers will be used for a donation to the Beis Hamikdash. Sha'avi mehem lechatas. If a person uses the terminology, I will bring from these a carbon chatas. Shavin Shameisar Chulin both agree that it will be chulin, it will be non-consecrated, and he gets to keep the funds for himself. Now, the next Mishnah, Rabbi Shimon is going to ask, why, in a case where a person says, these are for my shekel, does Beis Hillel say the extras belong to him? But if he says, these are for my chatas offering, Beis Hillel agrees with Beis Shammai that these funds will be used for an adava, for a donation to the Beis Hamikdash. It seems to be a discrepancy in logic. Amar Rabbi Shimon asks, Ma bin shkalim lachatas. Why is there a discrepancy in Beis Hillel's theory, in logic and rulings when it comes to the extras
of
so he answers, shkalim yeshlem kitzvah. When it comes to the half shekel requirement, you only have to give a half shekel, not more. You don't give more. Even if you're very wealthy, you don't give more than a half shekel. But when it comes to a chatas, the chatas in law kitzvah, but a chatas offering does not have a set amount of money that's allotted to it, which means a rich person could give an expensive chatas, a poor person could give a less expensive chatas. So therefore, when a person says these funds are for a chatas,
it can mean all of it.
He generally means all of it. When a person says these funds are for my half shekel, he generally means my half shekel, just a half shekel. And so therefore, Beis Hillel says in the shekel case, he doesn't have to give the extras to the Beis Hamikdash. Rabbi Yehuda argues. He says, Afla shkalim in lam kitzvah. Shkalim are also not an exact fixed amount. When the Jewish people came back from Bavel, they would give, for their half shekel, they would give a darkain. And then they went and they gave slaim, which is a different coin. And then they were giving other amounts. So, afterwards, they were demanding that they give a higher amount, but they wanted to give a dinner. The point here of the Mishnah is that it fluctuated to different amounts.
No, because the currency changes.
The currency changes
based on the ruling.
So now, Rabbi Shimon, Afal Pikein, even though true, the exact amount of the value of the coin that they gave for a machzas shekel fluctuated to different times, nevertheless, Afal Pikein Yad Kulam Shava, everybody gave that amount. Whether it was a darkain or whether it was a half shekel or an isser, doesn't matter. It always came out, everybody gave the same amount of money. And so when a person said, these funds are to discharge my amount, he means the current amount. And the extras he can keep. Aval chatas, but in the case of a carbon chatas, zeh mevi v'sela, v'zeh mevi v'shtayim, v'zeh mevi v'shalish. One person brings worth the value of one selah, another person brings the value of two sellahs, and a third person brings his chatas. He's rich and he wants to bring a big carbon chatas with the value of three sellahs. The point is that there's no set amount. at any time. Anybody can bring.
No, but I'm saying,
with any value.
What happens if a person lives in he's under the Persian rule, or he lives in Iran or whatever it is, and he gives his Persian money, but he has to then transfer it to a half shekel and only give a half shekel, or can he give the same amount of Persian money in the value of a half shekel?
Back in those days,
yeah,
they were.
Because that's what I think also is a question for Rabbi Yehuda.
Rabbi Yehuda's point is that over the ages it changed. Rabbi Shimon retorted that it doesn't matter that over the ages the value will change. It's always a one specific
give the same
coin.
amount.
Correct.
So I'm saying, so if somebody didn't live in that area,
somewhere else, he could say that he have to give the half shekel.
Probably have to transfer it.
No, he gives a half shekel. No, you have to give a half shekel. We already learned last week that the half shekel value would go up because people
were rubbed out.
No, because people were there was a supply and demand issue. But we also learned that a person could give 1 shekel for 2 people. So it seems that he didn't have to give an actual half shekel. As we're discussing this, he can give a different amount so long as it comes to the same value.
Okay.
Mishnah Hey. Shekalim chulim. Now we're reiterating Beis Hillel's ruling that the extra funds that were set aside for the half shekel monies are chulin. They're non-consecrated. He gets to keep it himself. Moiser asiras ha'efa, the extras for a tenth of an ephah offering, as well as moiser kinei zovin, as well as the extras that were set aside. A woman, a zav, a person who had a male discharge, and now he has to become pure. He has to bring 2 birds, and he set aside monies for the purchase of these birds. And now when he actually bought the birds, there was extra funds left over from the monies that he set aside. Kinei zavis, the same thing applies to a female zav, or kinei yeladais, or a woman who had a baby, and she wants to now become pure. She has to bring a pair of birds, and she had set aside funds, and now there are extra for those funds. V'chates, v'ashamais, similarly, a person who set aside funds for a carbon chatas, a sin offering, v'ashamais, or a guilt offering. In all of these cases, Meisrei and Nedava, the extras are a donative offering to the Beis HaMikdash. Zahaklal, this is the general ruling. Kol shuva l'shem chatas l'shem hashama, anything that comes for sin or guilt, Meisar and Nedava, the extra funds are a donation to the Beis HaMikdash. Meisar Eila, what happens if a person has to bring an Eila from a vow or whatever it is? So he sets aside funds. So the Eila, those funds, the extra funds, have to go for an Eila sacrifices. They are earmarked for specifically Ola sacrifices.
Like that means that if he has to bring another Ola, he
doesn't have to bring it. It doesn't have to be him. He can give it to somebody else and chip in with somebody else to bring an Ola sacrifice. But those monies go for Ola sacrifices. Moiser mincha lemincha. Extra funds that were set aside for flower offerings go to flower offerings. Moiser shlamim. Extra monies from shlamim offerings go to shlamim offerings. Moiser Pesach, this is a law we already learned in Masechtas Pesachim. Go to l'shlamim, go for shlamim sacrifices. Moiser Nazirim, l'Nazirim, a person who set aside funds to be used for the sacrifices necessary for a Nazir to become pure, but he didn't specify which Nazir he's going to give it to. He just said for Nazirim. So the rule is extra goes to other Nazirim. Moiser Nazir, but if he had specified that he's giving money for a specific Nazir's sacrifices, so then it goes to Nedava, goes for a donation to the Beis HaMikdash. Moiser Aniyim La'aniyim, extra funds that were collected for poor people, and we have a surplus of funds, so we keep it earmarked for other poor people. Moiser Ani Le'isa Ani, but if we took a collection for a specific poor person, then the extras go to that specific poor person, even though we've collected more than we had set out to, or more than we had needed. Moiser shvuyim l'shvuyim, extra funds that were collected, surplus funds that were collected for captives, to redeem captives, which is a very big mitzvah. So we earmark that for other future captives. Moiser shavi lo'isi shavi, but if we had collected it for a specific captive, then the extra funds that were collected goes to that captive. Moiser amesim lamesim. If we collect money to help bury the dead, in a general term, so the extras are earmarked specifically for the same cause for other dead in the future. But if we collected it for a specific person who died, for his burial costs, so the extras, the surplus, goes to his heirs. Rabbi Meir says, no, we can't give it to his inheritors because those extra funds are set aside and are placed in escrow until Mashiach comes, and then you'll have Tchias HaMesim, the person will be resurrected, and you give him the money. Rabbi Nassan disagrees. He says, the extras from collections that were made for a specific person who died, we make a monument over his burial place. Please join us again next week at 8:30 p.m.